Hi, my name is Dave Bode from BodeMedia.tv, bringing you this tutorial exclusively for audio.tutsplus.com. In this tutorial, we're going to talk about shotgun microphones. Now, a shotgun microphone is not that different from a lot of the other microphones that you may be familiar with in the quote-unquote normal recording studio world. In that world, you will have things like large diaphragm condenser microphones, smaller pencil condenser microphones, ribbon microphones, dynamic microphones, large diaphragm dynamic microphones. But you don't see a whole lot of shotgun microphones used in that environment. You also don't see them used a whole lot in live sound production either, where it's mostly dynamic microphones, handheld condensers, pencil condensers, sometimes large diaphragm condenser microphones for things like cymbals or drums. But you usually don't see shotgun microphones anywhere else except for video production. Now, one of the things that makes a shotgun microphone useful in video productions is that, in general, shotgun microphones have a higher output or sensitivity than most every other microphone. Sensitivity is a measurement of the microphone's output, which is measured in millivolts. This is done by the microphone manufacturers, and they place the microphone in a known sound field, and then they measure the microphone's output. Now, this is useful for comparing microphones and getting a general idea of what you can expect as far as the output for the microphone. Another way to look at that is if you're using two microphones on a similar sound source, and one microphone has a higher sensitivity, that microphone will produce more output at the same preamp level as, say, this microphone, which has a lower sensitivity. Now, specifically, this Sennheiser K6/ME66 has a sensitivity of about 50 millivolts, and this AKG C3000B has a sensitivity of about 25 millivolts. Now, this doesn't mean that this Sennheiser is going to be twice as loud, but it will be a significant bump in level compared to this AKG. Now, this doesn't mean that this Sennheiser is going to be twice as loud, but it will be a significant bump in level compared to this AKG. Microphones with a higher sensitivity, again, are useful for situations where you have to record very quiet sounds, things like people speaking, but also things like people whispering, and you can't get the microphone right in next to them. Most other recording applications, the general rule is you get the microphone as close to the source as you can because you'll get a better signal to noise ratio. Well, with a shotgun microphone, you can't do that, especially if you're shooting a video, because the shotgun microphone will be in frame and it's pretty large. It's not very easy to hide. So microphones with a really, really high sensitivity are especially useful for those situations where you have the microphone, 4, 5, 6 feet away, even 8 feet away. They will give you enough output so that you don't have to crank your preamp up to a point where it's going to give you a lot of noise. The other thing that makes shotgun microphones very unique is, well, the way they look. They are usually pretty long microphones with this tube here with some kind of slits or openings cut into it. Now, this tube is an interference tube, and what that does is cause acoustic interference by canceling the waves that come from the sides of the microphone. Because of this, they have a very narrow acceptance angle, especially in the uppermost frequencies. Now, this is very good because when you get the microphone away from the sound source, it still has a lot of directionality, and you can kind of focus in on the sound that you want by pointing it right at that sound source. Now, depending on the length of the microphone, this directionality can vary. Shorter microphones actually act more like a supercardioid or hypercardioid. As the microphone gets longer, the pattern starts to narrow. And so the very longest shotgun microphones have extremely narrow pickup angles, and very, very short ones, like microphones that are 7, 8 inches long, really act more like a supercardioid or hypercardioid microphone. Shotgun microphones are used primarily in a video production type environment where they're used to record people speaking, either in an interview or dialogue for a short film or a television series or a movie or whatever. Anytime you need a microphone to record a person speaking, but you need the microphone to be well out of the camera's frame, usually a shotgun microphone is used. Some shotgun microphones will have a very narrow acceptance angle in the front, but they'll also have a small area of acceptance to the rear of the microphone, right back here. And sometimes if you're in an interior and the microphone is positioned really high to the ceiling, this can become a bit of an issue because you can get some really weird sounding reflections off of the ceiling, and it can just sound a little bit funny. So again, the two things that make these very unique are the length, which gives it a very narrow pickup response, and the sensitivity. Essentially, all this microphone is a small diaphragm condenser microphone. It's not really that much different than a pencil condenser, except that it has this very long tube on the end of it. And so some shotgun microphones will have a more modest sensitivity, like the Rode NTG1 and the Rode NTG2, which are very popular shotgun microphones. I believe those two microphones are around 15 millivolts. Some very, very high-end shotgun microphones, up above $1,000, $2,000, have very high sensitivities, up above 100 millivolts and even higher. So a lot of the times in video productions, these are used on the end of a long boom pole, and you will see them pointing down. Now, the reason that they're pointed down has to do with how the microphone picks up and rejects sound. Shotgun microphones accept sound from directly in front of the microphone and have the greatest amount of cancellation on the sides of the microphone, kind of at 90 degrees of the orientation of the microphone. So if this is at 0, you have positive 90 and negative 90, if you will, or 270 over here. So they have the most amount of rejection there. So if you're recording someone speaking and you place the microphone like this, you'll get their voice like this, but you'll also get all of the things that are making noise that are directly behind them. So by placing the microphone up in the air and pointing it down, you're getting the most amount of cancellation around that person, noises that are coming from kind of a horizontal plane, which is a lot of the times what you want. That will be other people speaking nearby and any other kind of ambient noises happening in this kind of plane. So shotgun microphones are obviously at home in video productions, but there are a few other uses that I think are worth exploring. One of those is as a voiceover microphone or a podcasting microphone. A lot of the times for these particular jobs, you will see something like this, usually in a shock mount stand with a pop screen in front of it or a pop filter, and usually they're positioned pretty close to the speaker. Now these microphones, these large diaphragm condenser microphones, work really well for that. They have a nice big sound. Usually large diaphragm condenser microphones have a pretty good output. But what I've found is that they don't work for me all the time. Specifically, if you have to record in an environment that is not perfectly silent. Now, I record tutorials in my office where I also have my computer located. And my computer is a tower. Even though I've done a lot of work to make it as quiet as possible by turning all the fans down to their lowest speed and taking out all of the unnecessary fans, it still does make a bit of noise. So recently I switched over to using this Sennheiser shotgun microphone, and that has helped cut down on the noise on two fronts. For one, it's cut down on the fan noise because of how I have it positioned, like this. The fan noise is coming from over in the corner, so that cuts down a little bit on that, and it really focuses in on my voice. So even at the same level, the ambient noise is reduced a good amount. The other way it's cut down noise is that because this has a stronger output or a higher sensitivity, I can turn the preamp down just a little bit, which cuts down on a little bit of preamp noise. So for that application, for me, it has worked pretty well. Now, a couple of things that you want to watch out for. Sometimes, depending on the particular microphone and the way it's positioned, a shotgun microphone can accentuate mouth noises. Now, mouth noises are things in the back of the mouth, little clicks and clacks, things that happen with the tongue and saliva that can make some really weird sounds when you're recording. And because shotgun microphones are so directional, and especially with those higher frequencies, they can pick up on some of those mouth noises where another microphone may be a little bit easier on those types of mouth noises. So you can reduce that a little bit by how you position the microphone, but it's something to be aware of. And then at that point, all that's left is determining whether you like the sound of the shotgun microphone on your voice. Now, this particular shotgun microphone, I think sounds really, really nice for that application because it's got a nice kind of cutting, bright, crisp sound to it, especially when it's really, really close. And so it works really, really well for me, but your mileage may vary. Now, another application that a shotgun microphone can be used for is in a live sound environment. If you are amplifying a choir. Typically, the microphones that are used in this particular situation are very, very small condenser microphones, pencil condenser microphones, or sometimes large diaphragm condenser microphones. You almost never see a shotgun microphone used in this application. And I think the reason is that most live sound companies or venues that have kind of a fully featured sound system don't have access to them. And they probably don't know that they may be a good tool for that. But a lot of times I've seen a choir on stage with a full band. Usually the louder instruments are positioned on the other side of the stage. And there's only so much that you can push the choir before you get to feedback. Now, the actual level before feedback may not be that much different with using a shotgun microphone. What will be different is what that level actually sounds like. Microphones with a wider pickup pattern at a certain distance will pick up almost as much band as they will choir, but a shotgun microphone won't. If the shotgun microphone is positioned down or even at an angle, it will reject a lot of those sounds quite a bit. So at the same level, you will get a lot more of the sound that you're looking for and a lot less of the sound that you don't want. It can be of really great use for a shotgun microphone in that kind of situation. Also, another interesting use for a shotgun microphone can be on a podium or maybe a lectern. The microphones usually you will see on a podium are dynamic microphones, sometimes smaller condenser microphones, but you could get away with using a shotgun microphone on a podium if the person remained relatively stationary in front of it. Now, a shotgun microphone that's this long may not be super appropriate, but a shorter shotgun microphone that still has a good amount of directionality might be a good use for this type of situation. Now, a couple of things that you want to look out for here and when you're recording a choir is how much noise is transferred to the microphone through the body of the microphone. And in handheld microphones, this is usually referred to as handling noise. Now, a handheld microphone usually has very, very low handling noise because that's what you do with it. You hold it in your hand and you move it about. Some other microphones aren't designed necessarily with that in mind. And so a shock mount like this or some other kind of isolation microphone mount would be appropriate in those situations because vibrations from the mic stand itself can get easily transferred into a microphone through the body of the microphone. Now, this microphone in particular, you can hear if I just touch back here, you can hear that this shotgun microphone does not have a very low handling noise. So usually it would be better to use this on some kind of shock mount. Now, other shotgun microphones that I've used do have a much better handling noise, so they can be used maybe without a shock mount, but in general, it's better to use them with a shock mount, and then you just kind of cut down on any kind of rumbly noise or weird resonating frequencies that will be picked up by the microphone stand itself. Now, there's another application for a shotgun microphone that I think is a really great idea, but is seldom used, and that is the man on the street type situation. Now, if you are into gear at all, you have probably seen videos from CES or NAB or NAMM where you'll have presenters in booths, and there's a guy with a camera and he's asking questions, and so he'll usually put the microphone over to the representative and then back to himself and back and forth. And you also see a very similar setup on the news. Anytime a reporter is reporting from a location, they'll have the microphone right here, or if they have to interview anyone, they kind of go back and forth like this. In those situations, usually the microphone that's used is a dynamic microphone. Sometimes it could be a regular handheld dynamic microphone, something like a Shure SM50A or a Shure Beta 57A, something like that. But a lot of the times they use something called a reporter microphone or a reporter style microphone. Usually what a reporter style microphone is a longer handled omnidirectional microphone. Now, I've never really understood why these microphones were used. And the only reason that I can think of is that they're marketed specifically toward people doing that type of work, news interviews. Now, any microphone that's being used for that does have to be rugged, and so dynamic microphones are obviously a good choice because dynamic microphones are just about indestructible. Any condenser microphone, because it has electronics and it has a very, very small, super light diaphragm, are much more susceptible to things like moisture or physical shocks. But that considered, a shotgun microphone could be used in that situation and perform a lot better than a dynamic microphone, especially an omnidirectional microphone. Now, the one thing that you have to consider there in that type of situation is the handling noise, because you're going to have to physically handle that microphone. Now, this particular microphone does not have great handling characteristics, so I definitely would not use it in that type of situation, not without a shock mount, and that would kind of look a little bit ridiculous. I have used other shotgun microphones in that situation, and it has worked phenomenally. I believe the microphone that I've used with some success is the Audio-Technica AT897. It has a much lower sensitivity than this microphone. I believe it's about 15 millivolts, but it has a much higher sensitivity than a dynamic microphone. Now, dynamic microphones have a very, very small output because they don't have any electronics in them to boost the signal. It is what it is. And the microphones that I've seen with the most output, the dynamic microphones, are somewhere around 2.8 millivolts. Microphones like the Shure Beta 57A and microphones like the Sennheiser E835, both of those microphones have a pretty good output. But compared to a condenser microphone, it's really pretty low. And at 15 millivolts, that Audio-Technica shotgun microphone outperformed the reporter style microphone in terms of output a lot, which can help especially with a camera's preamp, because a lot of times a camera's preamp system is not very good. And so if you have to crank that thing up a lot, you can pretty much expect there's going to be some noise, there's going to be some hiss, there's going to be some nasty sounds in there. By using a microphone that has a larger output, a higher sensitivity, you can cut down on that and get a better signal to noise ratio. The other thing that worked really well in using that shotgun microphone in that kind of man on the street type situation where you have someone actually holding the microphone is the microphone's directionality. As long as they're holding it and pointing it right at their face, it sounds brilliant because you're canceling out all of the other sounds that are on that horizontal plane. Now, you are pointing it up at the ceiling in that type of situation, but that's not too different than turning it around and pointing it at the ground. And so a couple of things that you have to think about in that situation is handling noise. You'll know right away whether the shotgun microphone will work in that type of situation because if you touch it like this and you can hear a lot of this kind of finger noise like that, it's not going to work. The other thing is that you'll almost certainly need to use a windscreen on the microphone because if a person has it pretty close to their face and they have any kind of plosives, that's going to be picked up a lot on the microphone. Plus, having a windscreen on there gives you a little bit of cushion protection if the microphone gets bumped or even if it gets dropped. It gives a little bit of cushioning protection. So that's definitely something that can help is, use a nice big old fat windscreen there. It doesn't really look too different than a reporter style microphone, especially one of those reporter style microphones with those wacky flags on the top. Those things drive me nuts, but it can perform really well in that type of situation. So to sum it up, a shotgun microphone is a really great tool, kind of a specialized tool that can be used for a lot of different things, and certainly a lot more than people give it credit for. Not only can it be used for video productions, for recording spoken word and sound effects for Foley work, it can also be used as a podcasting or voiceover microphone in the right situation, where you're dealing with a little bit of ambient noise, and even when you're not, because they do sound nice. It can also be used in a live sound environment where you need to focus in on a specific area of sound and reject a lot of ambient noise. And finally, they can be used as a handheld microphone in a man-on-the-street type situation, as long as it has a good handling noise characteristic. If you're handling the microphone and you don't hear any of those kind of finger movements on the microphone, you can use it and it will sound really, really good. And I would bet that it sounds a good bit better than most of the other microphones that are used for those, especially those reporter style microphones. Thanks again for checking out this tutorial. My name is Dave Bode from bodemedia.tv, bringing you this tutorial exclusively for audio.tutsplus.com, and we'll see you around. Thanks for watching.